Welcome to another Food Plotters Journal podcast, a podcast dedicated to helping landowners grow better food plots with less equipment, less work, and more success. My name is VanderVeen of Strategic Habitat, and my co-host is John Komp of Northwoods Whitetail Food Plot Seed. In this episode, John and I explain the method of frost seeding switchgrass and the prep work needed last year to be successful this spring. And John has an update on the availability of the new RC Big Rock variety of switchgrass. We also talk about an alternative method to using the high-priced Roundup for weed control, and we finish up talking about the importance of doing the detail finish work on new hinge cut bedding areas so deer will actually use them to create more predictable deer movement past your hunting setups. So let's go right into the call with John. So John, how's the building coming along?
Wonderful. I'm actually sitting in the new office right now doing our first, did we do our last podcast while sitting in here? I can't remember. But yeah, we're in the new office. We're moved in, got all the computers are in, and that part of the business is in here now. And just finishing up one more room and then trying to figure out, you know, we're into some storage situations already. So we've got some wasted space up high. So probably got to build a few mezzanines for like box storage and stuff like that. We want to do a lot of storage up high. A dream come true to move into a building like this. I mean, we've talked before, Randy, we never ever thought anything like this was possible. You know, it was never really our intention, but it just, you know, it's morphed into something wonderful and just about done though.
Good. So I think the one question that, you know, is on a lot of guys' mind and they're anxious to get their hands on it. Obviously that's going to be the new switchgrass, the Big Rock variety. So
yep.
Do you have any updates on availability? I mean, there's probably a case where, you know, the suppliers just maybe underestimated the huge demand from us crazy habitat guys, right?
Yeah, I think, you know, I've been on the phone with the gentleman that is actually cleaning the seed right now, and as well as Roger, the gentleman that bred the seed. One of the things that they haven't been used to, and they call it snow seeding up there, and we call it frost seeding down here. They've never really have seen the volume of frost seeding. You know, they're mostly dealing with farmers who've got the equipment to do, you know, the drilling and stuff. So he was kind of shocked at the volume of demand for frost seeding. So that being said, they weren't cleaning seed as early as they needed to be. And their cleaning capability, was it 8,000 pounds a week? But they've got a lot of seed, and they're not cleaning it as fast as they will, as demand is for the seed. So that's one of the issues. You know, we're talking with them on. We're already working on next year's order and you know some ways to not have this situation next year. So that being said, I think we're allotted 4,000 pounds. Most of it's going to be the Big Rock. Some of it's going to be the Tecumseh. And that sounds like now early to mid-March is when Northwoods is getting theirs. So I think there's some vendors out there that haven't even gotten their first pallet yet. And we've already sold our first pallet, you know, end of January. So we're just back in line. I think this year what we're hoping for, I know the next pallet of seed most likely is going to be sold in 5-pound bags, and we do apologize to the folks that, you know, sold in 5-pound bags, and we do apologize to the folks that, you know, we've got folks calling and wanting 200 pounds and 100 pounds, and the problem is, Randy, and I'm not really exaggerating, we get probably 25 to 30 calls a day right now on switchgrass, and
wow.
Most of it, you know, since we've been doing this interview, we've had 2 calls come in. So
wow.
Yeah, it's so anyway, yeah, we're getting a lot of calls, and I'd say 75% of it's guys looking for the Big Rock. So what we're going to hope to do is put as much Big Rock, as many people's hands, because we sent out a bunch, you know, we had like 10 people that we trust their opinion. We know they're going to be unbiased. They're going to give us honest feedback, and that was something Roger wanted. And one of the reasons why they were attracted to Northwoods is because we've got so many good stand-up people in the industry working with us. So everybody got their seed sent out yesterday, the Big Rock that we had set aside for, you know, this 5-pound, because that's something Roger needs to know, because they're not just selling it in, you know, a certain, they're, you know, even though we're quote unquote the Michigan distributor for Big Rock, we're not selling it just in Michigan. You know, we're probably the most diverse distributor they're going to have, because we're from all the way from Alabama all the way up to Pennsylvania, New York. We got a bunch going to Minnesota, the Dakotas. I got a gentleman that just messaged me from Kansas who's going to probably be looking for Tecumseh. And so we send it all over the country. And I've got it to as many people that I can trust your opinion, a 5 or 6 pound bag. And it's, that's what we want to know. So this year, we're kind of just treating it like a setup to next year, and as much feedback as we can, as much planting diversity, conditions, and then planting methods. I want some guys are going to drill it, some guys are going to frost seed it, some guys are going to try to do the, kill it. I want some guys are going to drill it, some guys are going to frost seed it, some guys are going to try to do the, kill the grass a couple times and then try to catch some rains. And we're going to try to just see how this works, and that the everyday farmer or the everyday food plotter that may not have all that equipment, how can we have a planting regimen that's going to be the most successful for them.
Right. Okay. Now,
Mm-hmm.
I've been getting a lot of questions about the difference between the RC Big Rack and the RC Tecumseh. And so can you hit on that so guys might know what the difference is, so they, can maybe order the right stuff? And then, while
Sure.
you're at it, why not do a 3-way comparison with Cave-in Rock as well?
So now this is just, this is kind of a side note. This is Roger's information. I don't have any, I've never planted Tecumseh before. So this is just, I have a weekly conversation with Roger, and getting his opinions, because we do get so many calls. And I would rather, Roger's so busy right now, I'd rather try to answer the questions as best I can. And if there's something I can't answer based on the information I've already have, that I can quick message Roger and get that answer. So anyway, what Tecumseh was designed for, and where it does best, is the drier conditions. There's a line, basically, he told me, from Duluth, Minnesota, down to the southwest corner of Minnesota, and north of that line, and then west of that line, straight down to like Kansas. That's what this was designed for. South Dakota. We talk about Gabe Brown and how he's limited in rainfall out, and I think he's in Bismarck, North Dakota. That particular region, not so much sandy soil, but drier soil, drier conditions. And when he started talking about that, my eyes lit up, because I'm like, okay, this is central Wisconsin, this is central Michigan, north. Tried that, and he said, yes, this will be perfect for that. So you can grow RC Big Rock, you can grow Cave-in Rock in those conditions. However, it's going to struggle, be thin, and the standability in the winter, when we all need it, might not be there. Okay, the knock on switchgrass is it falls over, and ice and snow, blah blah blah. I'll give you that, because possibly we're planting switchgrass in environments it wasn't designed for. It's it's like planting brassica in sand. It'll grow. It's not going to reach its full potential. Now, Tecumseh is a 7-foot variety, and that will it thrive in sandy soil? Well, nothing really thrives in sandy soil, but it will do better. Okay, so you might get 6 feet with the Cave-in Rock that's tall and spindly, and it'll fall over with a little bit of snow, where the Tecumseh might get to 7 and stand up better. So that's kind of the region, stand up better. So that's kind of the region, or if we've got some sandy soil on one of the new properties we're working on. It's all sand, that upper Michigan red sand. It's close to green, it's the bay, the Lake Michigan, it's called Green Bay, but it's close to the bay, and the closer you get to the bay, the worse the soil gets. So that's what we're working with. And I said, this is exactly what we're going to do. We're going to do some Tecumseh, we're going to do some RC Big Rock, we're going to do some Cave-in Rock as a great comparison. So that's kind of the situation, which is, so for our friends in that sandy region of central and northern lower Michigan, central Wisconsin, that Wausau, Wisconsin Dells, Wisconsin Rapids, that central area, there's, we've been in contact with a lot of people, but the downside is we might only get 300 or 400 pounds. So, we'd like to get this in people's hands and say, okay, what are you guys seeing in central Wisconsin? What are you guys seeing in Michigan? I've got 3 or 4 guys I know this would be perfect for if we can get the supply, but it's,
Yeah.
it's a great product, but supply just isn't there yet. But now that they understand, and one of the things actually I was kind of shocked, one of the things they're doing, they had an allotment for, their 7 vendors or 6 vendors in the States. Now they pulled a bunch of that back, a couple thousand pounds, it sounds like, because they're investing into more property, more farms up in Canada to get this planted. So instead of giving us, maybe 500 more pounds of seed, they're actually planting it this spring to create, 10,000 more pounds of seed next year. So we as habitat managers, all our customers and everybody else's customers kind of shocked them on how much going into planning for next year.
Yeah. Well, and so John, I mean, a lot of guys, if they just want to create deer bedding and stands of switchgrass for deer bedding, they don't necessarily need the big rock or the Tecumseh. They can just go with the cave-in rock, if that's all that's available. Because I think, your supply on that's going to be much better than the RC big rock this year, at least.
This year it is, yeah. So the cave-in rock, I think on Tuesday we put a bunch of 50-pound bags on. We put a couple 105-pound bags on the site. And we're struggling to find it, but we're not overpaying for it. There's some people calling up offering a switch, and I'm like, no, we're not. That's ridiculous. I'm not paying that price, because then I have to charge, a certain price. And I'm like, there's a certain price. I've just said, no, you're out of your mind. But the other thing is we had a 1,500-pound order getting ready to send to us. When I saw the seed tag, I've just said, no, you're out of your mind. But the other thing is we had a 1,500-pound order getting ready to send to us. When I saw the seed tag, I declined it because it had foxtail and weed in it. And I'm just like, I'm not selling that. So somebody's going to buy it though. So if you're buying switchgrass and it's not from us, which we understand the supply is tight, I would demand a seed tag. I want to see the seed tag, so that's all I can tell. That market's kind of funny right now. But just be careful what you're getting.
Yep. And so I think really where the RC big rock and the Tecumseh really comes in, where it really shines over cave-in rock is if you've got to have a screen, to get you by some food plots, or let's say you're on some topography where, you want all the height you can get. That's probably where the Tecumseh and big rock will come in handy. And, the other reason, what I hear from Roger, the reason that this RC big rock and Tecumseh jumps out of the ground so much quicker is it doesn't waste any time trying to bush out. It just puts all its energy into going up and out competing the weeds. Is that correct?
Yeah, I believe the big rock, I thought he was saying it's a single stem variety. So that's why it grows so fast. And we've had conversations where he likes he wants to stick to that 8-foot number for the big rock and not get people's hopes up. But I've seen cave-in rock go on real crappy soil here. I've seen it go 9 feet. You're talking about the screening stuff. One of the things we're looking at, and I've had some really good conversations with some switchgrass growers, we possibly are looking at bringing in some of the 5-foot varieties because it's less cost and it's available. And you guys like to create bedding areas with the switchgrass in the pockets in bigger switchgrass plants to a struggle to get cave-in rock, or the price is just astronomical. I'm looking at some of these cheaper varieties, and when I mean cheap, I'm not talking cheap seed. I'm just saying, the cost is less because the demand isn't high for them. My thinking is that, when we were actually going to create some of this on some of these properties we manage, if I'm creating a 4 or 5 acre bedding area with pockets in here and there, why aren't we using the 4-foot, 5-foot variety? Because that's all the deer need to hide to bed. Okay.
Right.
And we can still use, so we can still use cave-in rock on the outside, maybe a couple of strips of it inside, and then use a little bit of the shorter varieties that stand up. We found one variety that stands up to winter, even possibly better than cave-in rock. And I thought, if you can get 5 or 6 feet out of this stuff, in 2 years, that might be an option we're looking at, because we don't want people to stop planting switchgrass. We just might alter the plan to where the exterior, and it's kind of like your house, the exterior, the house has to be exterior, and it's kind of like your house, the exterior, the house has to be tall, We want it screened. The interior can be a little bit shorter. We don't need 10 foot all the way through these switchgrass plantings. Maybe we can get by with 6 feet with switchgrass that's more readily available and not as costly. So that's something we're looking at. We're having those discussions the next 2 weeks with some growers. Obviously the shorter switchgrass varieties, there's going to be like a northern variety and then maybe like an Illinois South variety. So we got to kind of get that all lined up. We haven't done it yet, but that's something we're looking at just because of the lack of cave-in rock and the lack of varsity big rock. So if somebody can only buy 10 pounds and they need 30, well, the interior might be 6 feet. I think I talked to you a little bit about this. I talked to Jake a little bit about this. I talked to Jeff a little bit about this. The guys that are dealing with switchgrass all the time, I talked to Elliot a little bit about this, and they all seem to think that this might be something that we get with switchgrass all the time. I talked to Elliot a little bit about this, and they all seem to think that this might be something that we can pursue just for the simple fact that, we can save some customers money. But the other thing is we can actually get switchgrass in their hands this year.
Yeah, right. Exactly. And, when you're creating bedding areas, you're going to need a lot more volume than if you're creating a screen. So it just makes sense,
Right. Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah. I have folks call up, they want, 100 pounds of seed to do 35, 40 acre field. And I'm like, it's just not there.
No.
I can sell you 10, and that doesn't do many justice. But if we can do inside of that 10 acre field, we can do a 6 foot variety, which is plenty high for a whitetail to hide. You think about a mature buck, how tall his eyes are off the ground, maybe 4 feet.
Right. Yeah.
So that's just my thought process, because we're always trying to figure how can we help these folks save money is one, because everything else has gone up. I mean, diesel fuel in a truck, and I'm going, oh, good Lord, So Roundup is up, fertilizer is up, and we're doing our darndest to keep high quality here. But how do we save these folks money? You can save them $50 to $100. Hey, that's what they just tacked on to the Roundup. So, but anyway, that's our thought process, Randy. That's what we're working on as far as switchgrass goes. And so we're hoping to have some good stuff in the next 2 to 3 weeks.
Yeah. So, another topic related to that is I'm getting, several landowners wanting to frost seed their switchgrass into the bedding areas this year. One of the first questions I ask them is if they prepared that ground, last year, with a round of, glyphosate. And, a lot of the guys, they haven't. And it was, weeds and grasses and, it hasn't been eliminated. So that's something that if you want to touch real quick on the requirements for frost seeding, I think some guys might benefit from that.
Habitat managers out there doing switchgrass, and they'll kind of disagree with me. And that's fine. But this is, I try to look at a lot of variables. A lot of these ladies and gentlemen, cannot get to their land on a daily basis. They cannot get to their property maybe once a month. A lot of these folks are brand new to this switchgrass thing, and we all know it's expensive, and you got to have patience. So that going forward, this is what I recommend to the Northwoods customers. And again, if you disagree with me, I totally understand. There's more than one way to skin a cat, the old saying, but this is what I recommend to the Northwoods customers when they call me. I recommend a mowing in July, early. I recommend spraying Simazine 2,4-D and Roundup late July, late August, late September, and if you can without disturbing deer, the second spraying's Roundup 2,4-D. The second spraying's Roundup 2,4-D, third spraying Roundup. And then one more Roundup, if you can, if it's necessary, in early October, if you're not disturbing deer. Okay, then you can either frost seed before the snow hits in November, again, if you're not bothering deer, or when you start to get conditions in March. That's frost seeding, that's broadcasting, no access to a drill. Now, we're getting a lot of people that have already purchased it and calling me. Okay, I got my switchgrass. I'm going to go frost seed and then spray Simazine. and then spray Roundup. Well, there's guys that have done it. Okay, there's guys that have done it successfully, and I'm not saying it's not wrong. It's not anything I would do. I get very nervous about spraying anything on a new seed. That's just me. And like I said, there's a lot of people listening saying, John, no, I do it on a new seed. That's just me. And like I said, there's a lot of people listening saying, John, no, I do it all the time. I get that. Trust me, I get that. But I have heard so many customers call me and say, "You're selling junk seed. I got nothing. Nothing grew." Well, how did you plant it? Well, I put the seed on the ground, and then when it greened up, I sprayed it. Okay, when did you spray it? Well, late April or May 1st. Well, the switch germinated and you killed it.
Mm-hmm.
So and there's no such thing as okay, so Upper Michigan I can spray Roundup until March 1st or May 1st, or in Illinois I can spray Roundup up until April 25th. It doesn't work that way. It works on soil temperature, it works on nighttime temperature and moisture in the ground, and there's a lot of variables that change every year. So again, I'm not saying this is wrong. I'm not saying that at all. So, but what I am saying is to the folks that are new to the switchgrass, to their customers, I would wait for spring green up, Roundup 2,4-D and Simazine. Go another 4 weeks, Roundup and 2,4-D. Wait another 4 weeks, Roundup, and drill it that weekend. Okay. Now, I don't have access to a drill. Rent one. You can pay somebody to do it. I know our buddy Brandon at First Choice Food Plots runs all over Upper Michigan. He's out in Minnesota, Western Wisconsin, Illinois. He is everywhere.
Mm-hmm.
He's a great guy to do this. We have some installers in Michigan that'll do this. Yes, it's expensive to pay to have somebody drill it, but think about the cost of the seed. Okay. Now, that being said, if you don't want to pay somebody to drill it, I would seriously look at the frost seeding method. So that's what we recommend to customers. And the reason we recommend that to customers is because it's the safest, easiest way to have success. Recommend that to customers is because it's the safest, easiest way to have success. There are other ways of having success, multiple ways of having a successful food plot screen. And there's some great habitat managers on Facebook and stuff like that do it other ways. But keep in mind, we're dealing with, somebody that has plenty of planting experience to no planting experience, and we're trying to find the safest way to do this. So that being said, that's how we recommend it to people. The other thing, actually we just answered the question today. Somebody wants to put it in a cornfield. So if it was stubble where they chop the corn and you just that little stem standing up, I think you can get by with some Simazine and some frost seeding.
Mm-hmm.
As long as my first question is, how was the corn harvested? My next question is, how good of a kill did the farmer get? Okay, because if there was anything green in there, you're gonna have a mess in the spring, more than likely. Okay, so now if it was trash off, I've also seen a mess 6 inches thick that I just don't think the switchgrass, one's going to penetrate. Two, you got 6 inches of trash sitting on top of that little tiny seed. Is it going to get enough sun to germinate? I don't know. What I tell the folks is that you might have to look at, getting that trash off there, whether it's mowing, disking, and then start the process of spray, and then have it drilled in June. There's a lot of guys out there, again, that are saying, I've done it in a combine cornfield. It worked great. Awesome. Because you got to see it, but I'm going based off of, I'm not there actually looking at the cornfield and determining whether we can get through this thatch or not. So I always tend to err on the side of caution with our customers, because I don't want somebody calling me up and saying you're selling a bunch of junk. Nothing grew. Well, your planting wasn't, in my opinion, the best chance for success. So that's how we recommend it, Randy. And like I said, there's
yeah. And there's, with the cost of Roundup and some of these other habitat related products going up in price, some guys are just unwilling to, use Roundup either because of the cost, or, some guys just don't want to use any herbicide, period, from a principal standpoint. So there are alternatives, and you could still be successful at food plotting without using any herbicide. And, one of those is just to go in there and disc it, say once every 3 to 4 weeks, and just keep disking those weeds until, you're ready to plant. And what me and you are pretty pro no-till, so that kind of goes against that. But if the alternative is to not, spray Roundup, you really don't have much choice.
Our food plots are tillable food plots. We minimum till them. I still, 20 years later, apply to the Paul Knox recipe. We run the tiller one time a year, 1 inch deep, to incorporate the tillable food plots. We minimum till them. I still, 20 years later, apply to the Paul Knox recipe. We run the tiller one time a year, 1 inch deep, to incorporate the red clover into the soil for our brassicas, and then we might scratch it up to plant, the fall forage red clover radish combo. And again, but those plots haven't seen Roundup in, as long as we've been doing them. So we're always looking for, okay, what's, the crimper does our garden where there's no Roundup and there's no tilling. How many, I'd say maybe 2 or 3% of the food plotters out there have access to a crimper.
Mm-hmm.
So the thing with like when we do the soil builder with folks in the sandy area, we might use a disc, but we're not using the disc, so to speak, to get that stuff into the ground. We're using the disc as a down on the ground, and we've done that with buckwheat. One time I used a pallet with buckwheat. We forgot a piece of equipment, and I'm looking at this buckwheat and I'm going, oh boy, now what? Well, we spread all the seed. This is about 8 or 9 years ago, and we just drug a pallet behind, knocked it down, and then we knocked the buckwheat down north and south, and then we ran the disc that didn't really even penetrate the soil. We ran that east and west to chop the buckwheat up. So there's methods, to get away from Roundup. But if you've got a severe weed problem, a lot of times you can take care of that. You might have to disc in the spring, but smothering it with a buckwheat, a soil builder, rye, that kind of thing, and then smother it again with rye. See, what a lot of people don't recognize, and we actually had this conversation again on Facebook today, some of these things we plant in the fall have a natural weed killer built into them, and cereal rye is one of them.
Yeah.
Okay. So a cereal rye plot coming back in the spring built into them, and cereal rye is one of them.
Yeah.
Okay. So a cereal rye plot coming back in the spring is very clean. Brassica is another one. Brassicas, and I think it's the forage brassica varieties, like the rapes and the forage brassicas, have a built-in weed killer. If you've ever looked at, I know ours in particular, like a sweet peas plot the next year, there might be a little bit of rye in it if we try to overseed some rye, but that thing for the most part is pretty clean. And so, if you can quick get some, get some rye or buckwheat planted into there when the soil temperature warms up, and maybe run a light disc pass to get that stuff growing, that's going to outcompete a lot of those weeds. So, that's something Paul always taught, about natural weed killers. So, that's what we're doing. Yeah. The price of Roundup, boy, I think I've seen jugs up to $200 already, and I'm just shaking my head going, wow.
Yeah,
that's,
exactly. So, you had mentioned just a while back that you were going to be making some improvements to your fall forage blend. So what you got going there?
Well, this again goes to our friends in the sandy soil region that we thought, we get a lot of folks that do the soil builder in the spring, fall forage, and maybe some crimson clover combo in the fall. And that's really all they can grow. And we've got some plots here that I was running it on, and I was just kind of not really satisfied with the growth of the peas and sometimes the winter wheat. The rye and the oats did really well. So we tried last year, and then it actually also works pretty good as a no-till, because all three of these products do fairly well no-till. I mean, I think they do better than the peas and the wheat. Is we pulled the peas and the wheat and we put buckwheat in, but we had to be careful to get the right ratio to not smother the oats, and the right ratio to not smother the oats and the rye in the fall forage. Okay. So we messed around with the ratios and stuff, and I think we got it just right, but it worked extremely well. And people think buckwheat in the fall. Well, right. Keep in mind that a lot of folks aren't blessed with, beautiful black Illinois, Iowa, central Wisconsin, south central or western Wisconsin soil, that Mississippi River Valley. We're not all blessed with that. We're blessed with 5 pH clay and sand. And so what I always believe in, plant in your area what's going to get the most nutritious for that ground. Cereal rye is at the top, buckwheat's at the top. And I've always, for the last 4 or 5 years in our lesser soils, we've added buckwheat, and it becomes the quote unquote candy crop, the sprinkles on your ice cream that the deer quickly seek out. So we know a frost is, one frost and that buckwheat's dead. But for the most part, the buckwheat won't even see that. That almost becomes the first thing the deer seek out in this food plot. That's what we found. Very few of the buckwheat plants made it to the frost, and then they hit the oats, and then they hit the rye. So we just wanted something to add a little bit more for our friends and customers that have the sandy soil conditions. So that's what we came up with.
Well, you know, that's interesting, John, because I think you'll remember that side-by-side comparison I did on a client property last year.
Yeah.
Where, you know, it was not a test side by side between brand A and brand B. It was actually a side-by-side test to help guys and show guys, okay, if you got sandy soil, you know, this test is going to show you, what are you better off planting, a grain blend or a brassica blend? And so, you know, guys might remember the left side was the grain blend, the right side was, you know, brassica. Now that field was in buckwheat, you know, for the summer cover crop. And anyway, the landowner, there was some issues, you know, we did not get the buckwheat terminated like we hoped to, and it was, you know, done late. So there was a lot of volunteer seed in that field. And so buckwheat came up on both sides. And I'll tell you, you know, to your point, John, those deer seeked out that buckwheat right out of the gate. And so it really allowed, you know, some of these other plants to take off because they were leaving pretty much the oats and the rye alone. They were leaving the brassicas alone, and they were hitting the buckwheat on both sides. So, you know, a buckwheat planting in the fall in late August is not a bad thing. And it really will, you know, allow some of those other things to take off. So you know, just to kind of finish the side-by-side comparison, by the time we got to gun season, you know, it was clear that the deer activity was mostly on the grain side versus the brassica side. And there was still more greenery on the grain side than there was the brassica side in November. So, you know, clear winter was in sandy soil was, you know, your choice really is you're better off going with a grain blend.
That kind of reinforces our thought process is that every single food plot is only going to produce X amount of tons of food. That's all it's going to produce. That's all that soil can put out. So we could put out 300 pounds of food. We try to plant brassicas, or we can get 2,000 pounds of food if we can plant something that's conducive growing in sandy soil. Now, if I was in, let's say, Western Wisconsin, you know, Northern Illinois, beautiful soil, I would not use buckwheat, because it might not be attractive as, let's say, an August planted soybean, or, you know, I really love our attractive as, let's say, an August planted soybean, or, you know, I really love our oats. They're phenomenal. And again, the one thing is, we're not trying to create this blend just to create another revenue stream, or to create just for the sake of creating another blend. I am living this. I have a food plot 300 yards from where I'm sitting right now that this blend is the only thing that'll grow. So I had to, you know, obviously we did this out of necessity for our customers, but I did this out of necessity for, you know, me hunting. So, but that being said, we can now create something for these folks that are, whether you want to say you're blessed with sand or you're cursed with sand, or, you know, and it may not even just be sand, Randy. It could be clay that's low in pH, that's not going to grow a good brassica crop. It's not going to grow a pea is going to grow, but it's going to be, you know, short, yellow, and stunted. You know, we understand that. We're living it on a daily basis here in Upper Michigan.
Yep, absolutely. You know, it's there's no big broad brush that you can paint and answer everybody's question. You know, everything is site specific.
Exactly.
Yep.
Sure.
Yep.
Speaking of site specific, I saw on Facebook you and Jake took a ride out to West Virginia. Well, how did that turn out?
Yeah, no, that was a real interesting few days out there on a client property in West Virginia. Kind of an interesting scenario, and this is something that a lot of landowners are missing. You know, Jake and I, you know, spent a lot of time together those 2 days, and, you know, we just talking to each other about, you know, how so many landowners are missing doing the detail work after doing a big hinge cut project. So this landowner in West Virginia, you know, he's got about 160 acres, something like that, but, you know, a lot of big open woods. And so he had Jim Ward come in and do a big hinge cut open woods. And Jim, I mean, you know, Jim Ward, he goes in there with a helper and he puts some trees down. I mean, we're talking, you know, hundreds, thousands of trees.
Yeah.
And just creates a massive bedding area. So when Jim shows up, he's got 2 days to get as much trees on the ground as he can. And so, he's not really there to do the detail work. When Jim's done putting trees down, it's time for him to go. So he doesn't have the time to go in and create the individual beds, put all the deer trails through the bedding area, and do a lot of that detail work that really is going to, take that bedding area from, say, 80% up to 100%. So
Right.
the landowner had me there last year just to kind of check that out and create a habitat plan, maybe set up a hunting strategy for some ambush spots. And it was just amazing how the deer were using it, but they weren't moving through because it was starting to grow back. And it was just amazing how the deer were using it, but they weren't moving through because it was starting to grow back, starting to close up inside that bedding area. So he had Jake and I there last week, and basically we just went in there and created a network of trails and put in the beds, and we took some other trees down just to allow some more sunlight to get in there. And we both said that outside of Jake's property, I mean, this is probably one of the best bedding areas that we've worked on outside of our own properties. And so, this landowner now has got 7 great ambush spots, around the property that we've dialed in. We put in some barriers, some barricades, to kind of steer deer closer to some of the stand setups. And, he's got every wind covered. And, so before Jake and I were there, he maybe had 1 or 2 spots that he could really count on. Well, now he's got 7. So always a think alike. We start on a project and we hardly even have to, tell each other what we're going to do, because we go our own ways, and we start cutting trees. And it just turned out really well. Client was very happy. For Jake and I think the most favorite thing that we like to do when working on a property is doing the detail work, because, we've said when Jim goes in there, it's kind of like framing a house. He's doing all the grunt work, all the big stuff. And then Jake and I come in later and we do the finish work. We're finishing the bedrooms, and we're putting in all the hallways, and, right down to putting mints on the pillow. It's exciting.
What do you like better? Because I've seen you in some of your videos where you're going in there and you're knocking 20, 25 trees in a row. So what do you like doing better? Finish work, the detail work, or do you like doing the grunt work?
I have to say I do enjoy doing the grunt work, but we're taking the big trees down. But if I had to make things up, making it easy for the deer, those deer are lazy, and you give them some aisleways to go through, you can steer those deer right by the stands that you're going to be sitting in. And setting up the ambush spots, that's very gratifying.
Yeah.
That's where it all comes together.
How many trees did you guys both agree on without even just said, you both looked at a tree and said, yep, this tree right here, without even discussing it?
Oh, all the time. Shoot. And the nice thing about this property, it had a lot of white oaks, had a lot of hickories, a lot of stuff that would hinge very well. And, some guys, would look at that and they say, wow, you guys cut down some, white oaks. Are you crazy? But, when you got a 6 to 7 inch white oak next to another white oak, let's say it's only 6-7 feet away, and the other white oak is, 3 times its size. Well, the smaller one's never going to amount to anything. Smaller one's never going to amount to anything, right? Because it's just shaded much by the big one. So, hey, it's a great hinge tree. Let's take it down. It's going to stay alive. It's going to create a lot more food at the deer level, but with the leaves, than it will, trying to struggle dropping a few acorns in the fall.
Yeah. So and that's an interesting thing. And where, there's people that are more conducive to creating board feet per acre than they are, I guess, for lack of a better term, deer habitat.
Mm-hmm.
I always tell people that the gentleman that pays the taxes is in control for that property. And if I was interested in board feet per acre, I certainly wouldn't be talking to a guy like Randy or Jake. And I'm interested, but then if I'm interested in killing deer, seeing deer, holding deer, and growing deer, I am talking to a guy like Jake and Randy who might knock a beautiful oak tree down, but there's a reason for that oak tree. Killing deer, seeing deer, holding deer, and growing deer, I am talking to a guy like Jake and Randy who might knock a beautiful oak tree down, but there's a reason for that oak tree being on the ground, because like you just said, there's another one sitting right next to it, and this younger one. And I think that gets lost on a lot of guys that they deer hunt, but they also, cringe when they see a money tree, so to speak, hit the ground.
Yeah. Well, and John, Jake and I were talking too, in that, he's seeing the same thing I am when you go to a client property once and then you go back maybe 2, 3, 4 years later. Yeah, the landowner may have gone in there and done some hinge cutting, and he may have even done a good job. But what we see generally is the detail work and getting the individual beds and the runways through the bedding areas created. A lot of times we see that never happens. They just don't have the time to do some of that detail work than time. And so that's why he has Jim come out. He's got, he has us come out. He's had some other people come out as well. And, he's going to be rewarded for it, because now he's just, like I said, he's got 7 great ambush spots that cover all the wind directions. And it's just going to be, Jake and I are actually kind of envious. We're pretty jealous of what he's got now, and it's just going to get better. So,
you think about that analogy, Randy, when he's got more money than time. Let's, hey, that's good for him. Say an auto repair. I can change my oil. I can change my own oil. I can figure out how to change an engine in a truck or anything like that. But you know what? Guy down the road that has changed 100 engines and changed oil 1,000,000 times will probably do a better job than I will. And that detail work that a guy like you, a guy like Jake, that understand, there's very few in the industry that can get the last 5, 6, 7% out of a property that's needed, but probably will make the biggest amount of difference. So you guys got there and the grunt work was done, but the detail work, and I've seen a lot of properties that you guys have done in plans, and to me that separates the good ones from the great ones.
Absolutely. You could see on this property that some of these areas that were open were starting to close in, and these deer are just lazy. And if it's too tough to get through some of these areas, they might use it, but how much of that bedding area are they going to use? Maybe only 5% of it. Well, now they can basically get through, see the trail, the network of trails going through there. It was just, we're going to put a video out at some point. Jake and I are both busy at this time of year, obviously walking properties, but sometime this summer we'll get that video put out and really share with guys, this is what a hard cut area looks like by Jim Ward. And then to have it, dialed in for maximum use and predictability, that's the thing. Repeatable, predictability year after year is something that you really want to do. And, otherwise you're just relying on hope and luck, so why not do the detail work, make it predictable, and it's so much more fun.
When you talk about detail work though, and Jake's got his property, he's always cutting. It's like the detail work, it's not that it's never done, it's got to be continuously maintained.
Yeah.
Okay, so you guys might have gone in and have done the quote unquote finish work, but now every couple of years maybe he has you guys come back to do the maintenance. Like you build a brand new house, like you had said, Jim did the framing and you guys did the finish work. Now, when Mr. and Mrs. Smith move into the house, clean it. If a light bulb goes out, you got to do that. They're not calling the contractors to come back and do that. They're maintaining. So you guys might be called back to maintain that quote unquote bedding area for years to come. They're not calling the contractors to come back and do that. They're maintaining. So you guys might be called back to maintain that quote unquote bedding area for years to come, but it's a never ending cycle. That's what I'm learning.
Yeah. And, just like this week, we got this ice storm coming through Michigan. Well, there's going to be a lot of tree damage probably if some guys get enough ice on their trees. Well, their bedding areas are going to get clogged up. Their aisleways are going to get blocked and the deer aren't going to use it. And, some guys will say, well, that's my sanctuary. I never go in there. Well, you have to go into your sanctuary at this time of year because you have to clean up some of that stuff. Otherwise, you're going to be on the outside wondering, why aren't my deer going in that sanctuary? So maintenance is very key, and Jake does it, on his property regularly. He doesn't fret about going into his, bedding areas, cleaning up. And, that's again, a good property. Exactly.
The one thing you talk about, the habit or the not going in the sanctuary, I don't know of any good habitat manager, at least the ones we work with, that do not recommend staying out of the sanctuary. Every one of you guys said, like you just said, we've got an ice storm that's about to punch us in the face. And I know we got one in December, right during muzzleloader season. And I remember getting out of the deer stand and I had to move trees out of the way so I could see 50 yards. And that's going to have to be addressed. So if you bought into the theory, you never go into your sanctuary might not be a sanctuary except for rabbits.
Yep.
And so that's a great point you made. And that people that do have those sanctuaries, maybe, like here in Upper Michigan, I don't like going into the woods a whole lot right now because of the snow, and I don't like pushing deer around. But I'll tell you what, when we start to get down to 6 inches of snow and they're starting.
Wondering how big are these areas that Jake and I were working on? Well, the main one that we are working on, I would say it was a little over 100 yards long and maybe 50 to 60 yards wide, so it was over an acre in total, and by the time we got done, I mean, we didn't go around and count the beds, but we kind of estimated afterwards, I bet you that bedding area could house up to 100 deer, no problem. And many of them can't see each other. And this is even in February when there's no leaves on the trees. Can you imagine what it's going to be like in October?
What I understand, that's a big deal. Can't see other deer.
Yep. Yeah, multiple doe families. You can even have a buck slip in there and on the downwind side, and he can keep track on all the girls in that bedding area just with his nose laying on the far side. Things just become so much more entertaining, put it that way, when you're sitting in the stand watching over something like that.
Good stuff.
Yeah, good stuff. When you're sitting in the stand watching over something like that.
Good stuff.
Yeah, good stuff. Well, hey, John, hopefully, you missed the brunt of most of this snow and ice coming your way. And we get on with spring. Hey, it's March next week, so I'm looking forward to it.
Yeah, we're waiting for some more warmer weather up here already.
Yeah. Hey, I guess the one thing I just wanted to mention too, a lot of guys are going to be going out when the snow is gone and, maybe hinge cutting some trees and that, but just wanted to remind everybody that the oak wilt disease period is going to start April 15 until about July 15. So, if you have a lot of red oaks, black oaks on your property, those are the ones that are more susceptible to the oak wilt disease. So, you're going to want to get those cut if you have any plans to do so before April 15. The white oaks, I don't worry about the white oaks. They are not as susceptible as the red and black oaks. So just a point for some guys to remember going into the spring here.
Yeah, good information for sure.
All right, John. Well, hey, always good catching up with you, and I'm sure we'll have some more interesting things to talk about next time we hook up. Maybe sometime in March again, we'll hook up again and do another.